Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His mercy endures forever. Welcome, my friends, to Faith Matters with Phillip Campbell. This is a Catholic variety program broadcasting here on Good Shepherd Catholic Radio in the paradise of Jackson, Michigan. I am your host, as always, Phillip Campbell, and it's my pleasure to be back with you again for another episode of Faith Matters. Now, let's talk today about education. My life, as many of you may know, has been bound up with education for my entire adult life. I am a teacher. I am a author of educational materials and curriculum materials. And one of the great things about being involved in education, specifically at this time in history in this country, is that there's so many educational opportunities that abound out there today, both because the internet has provided so many more opportunities for accessing knowledge, but also there's a growing realization that more opportunities for individualization and individualizing a student's educational experience can be very beneficial for them. And one of the fruits of this is a practice that's grown in the United States exponentially over the past few decades, and that is the practice of homeschooling. And with me today to talk about homeschooling in general, Catholic homeschooling, and specific homeschooling options out there is Maureen Wittmann. Now, Maureen is a wife. She's a mother of 7 children and a grandmother of an additional 7. She's co-editor and contributing author of A Catholic Homeschool Treasury from Ignatius Press and The Catholic Homeschool Companion from Sophia Institute Press, and Why Should I Learn This by Ecce Homo Press, as well as her wonderful book For the Love of Literature, which teaches you how to homeschool using literature as the center of your curriculum. She's very grateful for all the homeschool parents who've helped her over the years, and she works to give back to the homeschooling community through Homeschool Connections, which she co-founded and currently serves as co-director. And full disclosure, I teach for Homeschool Connections, so Maureen is my boss. She also has the best laugh of anyone I know. So Maureen, welcome to Faith Matters.
Thanks, Philip. It's always good to talk to you.
It's good to hear from you as well. So a lot of listeners might not be super familiar with homeschooling. Can you just set this up for us? Where did homeschooling come from in the United States? It's very big now, but it wasn't always the case. What's the origin of the modern homeschool movement here in the USA?
Well, it's funny. Most people affiliate homeschooling with evangelicals in the 1980s as that being the root. But it really goes back to the late 60s, the 1970s, to dropout hippies, people who were, who felt that the school system was just too conservative, and they started educating their children at home. And then in the 80s, you have the evangelicals coming in, dissatisfied because prayer has been taken out of school, and they feel that schools are becoming too liberal, and becoming anti-religious. So they started homeschooling in the 80s. So that's really where the movement started taking off, was then. Catholics were late to the game because we had Catholic schools to fall back on. And then so most of the Catholics who came into homeschooling, you saw them coming in the 90s, the early 2000s, and their reasons were usually more positive, in that instead of running away from something, they were coming to homeschooling because they saw the fruits of it in their friends. That's how I came to homeschooling. I just saw what a great way it was to raise my children, raise my family, as well as educate them. And so I just started from the very beginning. I didn't pull them out of school. It was just something that I saw other people doing and thought, I really would love to do this too. So that's kind of just the basic groundwork of it.
And in the beginning, there was questions about the very legality of this in the early days, correct?
Correct. In fact, when I started homeschooling, it had just been legalized in Michigan, where I live. Michigan used to be the most difficult state to homeschool in, where you had to have, the parent had to have a teaching degree. They had to be a certified school teacher. Your home had to meet all the same requirements as a school building, so exit signs, etc. It had to meet fire codes. So it was okay to sleep there, excuse me, but not okay to educate there. So the law was so restrictive. Pioneers took it to court, and the Michigan Supreme Court ended up throwing the law out completely. So Michigan is actually one of the easiest states to homeschool in because they never put another law in to replace it. So I thank those pioneers. I had friends when I first started homeschooling who homeschooled to black out their windows. They couldn't go to the grocery store with the kids during the day. They were just scared of criminalized for truancy.
That's wild. That's wild. But now homeschooling, yeah, I mean, granted, restrictions are different in different states, but it's legal in all 50 states now, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Now, before we get into particulars of homeschooling or how it works or different questions, what would you say is the fundamental principle that's at the heart of homeschooling?
I would say the fundamental principle is that the parent is the primary educator. We see that in church documents, right? That the parent is the primary educator. In fact, I would go so far to say all parents are home educators, no matter where they get their formal academics, because how well your child does in site-based school is going to depend on that home life and how much you support them in education. And most of us, if not all of us, taught our children from the infancy how to talk, how to walk, how to love Jesus. The most important lessons come from the home. So I would say the key to homeschooling is recognizing the parent as the primary educator. We as parents love our children more than anyone else, so we're going to make sure they succeed. And we're going to do what we need to do in order to make academics work and to overcome any hurdles, even special needs, etc.
Yeah, now, I mean, I've taught for you for, I think, 10 years now, but, I've also taught in live settings. I was raised in the public schools. I was also, my formal education is as a public school teacher. I'm a state certified teacher here in the state of Michigan. And even in the public schools, as you alluded to, it's common knowledge that the most important determining factor between a student that succeeds and one that falls behind is parental support and parental involvement. That's what makes all the difference in the world. So you're right. Even if you choose to send your kids to public school and you're getting involved and supporting them, you're still acting in that role as primary educator. But when you say primary educator, I think a lot of people just imagine homeschoolers sitting at home with mom all day, every day, and mom is responsible for 100% of the instruction, and they're sitting at a little desk in a weird little room, and mom is just, but homeschooling can be a lot more varied and dynamic than that, correct?
Correct. I would say we probably car schooled more than we homeschooled. When my kids were little, we were usually done with academics by noon. And most days we were out and about. We were going to homeschool clubs. My kids participate in shooting sports, Science Olympiad. We were in a Renaissance music group for a while. We relied heavily on community, and that is one of the beauties of homeschooling. Is the homeschool community is really a very beautiful and loving place where I could have never done it without my fellow homeschoolers who reached out and helped me in those early days. And so we would come together. We had a co-op, a history co-op that met in my living room every Thursday, just 2 or 3 other families, and we would get together and we would learn about history. I ran the teen group for almost 15 years. We met in a local coffee shop. I had teens drive up to 90 minutes to join us and talk about books. And we did Socrates Cafe and all kinds of really great things like that. So usually there are people who are pretty homebound, but for the most part, homeschoolers are in the community way more than their site-based school peers just because we have more time and opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and that's not even taking into account like accessing things like internet classes or bringing in outside tutoring. Like this semester, this year, my daughter Lucy, who's 14 now, she says to me, "I really want to learn Japanese." And obviously that's not something I'm competent to teach her. So I called the University of Michigan, their Asian Studies department, and I just said, I have a 14-year-old daughter. I homeschool. She wants to learn Japanese. Can you recommend a tutor? And I was surprised. The head of the department got back with me and said, I will recommend my top student who was
Love it.
a native Japanese speaker who was trained at a master's level to teach Japanese to English speakers. And she comes out to my home twice a week and spends an hour with Lucy teaching her Japanese. And after 6 months, she's carrying on little conversations
Lucy.
in
It's
Japanese.
so
It's really neat. And when you homeschool, you have the flexibility to do things like that. Like, you want to learn Japanese? All right, I'll bring in a Japanese tutor. That's just the way it is.
So I think that's a really important distinction for us to make here. As a home educator, that doesn't mean I teach everything. Sometimes being a good home educator means knowing when to reach out for help or find other people to come in and tutor. I mean, that's the whole reason why we started homeschoolconnections.com, was because I saw friends who wanted to keep homeschooling but put their kids in school only because they did not feel equipped to teach high school subjects. And maybe they felt equipped to teach most everything but Latin or chemistry.
Yeah.
Well, here's a resource where you can have someone else teach your child calculus or physics, whatever. And these days, there's so many resources out there. There's community college, online courses. There are scripted curriculums. You know, you can probably teach yourself whatever you want using YouTube. So, you know, back when I first started, it was the public library. We lived in the library, and we learned so much there.
Well, this is a very good point. Many parents might like to homeschool, but feel unworthy, unable to handle it. Maybe they did. I see this a lot. Maybe they did poorly in high school and they have a bad self-image of themselves as a educator. Maybe the responsibility is daunting. What would you say, and what have you said to parents in that situation?
Yeah, I've talked to a zillion parents in that situation, and 9 times out of 10, probably 99 out of 100, you can do it. Again, no one loves your child like you. You're going to make sure they succeed, and you're going to get the resources you need if you can't do it yourself. But quite frankly, if you're teaching a first grader, do you really need any more than first grade knowledge? You can learn alongside your children. In fact, I would say probably the number one most important ingredient in a successful homeschool is a joyful mother, someone who is excited about learning. Emotions are contagious, and if your children see that you're excited to learn American history, they're going to be excited too. So you can learn alongside them, learn together. You know, I used to just stay 3-4 weeks ahead of my kids in the reading, so I looked pretty knowledgeable when the time came to teach them.
Yeah,
I probably didn't know it till 3 weeks before. So again, you can, if you're not comfortable, there are outside tutors, there are clubs, you can do co-ops. We had friends who were amazing musicians, and we would trade. They would teach my kids music, and then I could teach their children history. So, you know, there are those opportunities as well.
Yeah, so perhaps so we have to have a kind of a dynamic view of homeschooling. It doesn't mean all the school happens at the home, all the school done by the parent. It just means that the parent and the home is really at the center of the academic life for the student. That might involve outside tutors, it might involve turning to help, participating in co-ops, travel, things like that. Now, you've homeschooled longer than I have. I've been doing it for 15 years, but we always hear, probably if I had $5 for every time somebody asked me about socialization, about how does your kid get social time? There's that laugh I told you about, folks. What do you say when people say, like, how does your kid get socialized?
You know, when I first started homeschooling, I would get defensive, and I would go on and on about how we get in the family minivan and we travel to this event and that event. And, you know, I realized one day, I don't need to do that. I am teaching my children the golden rule. I'm teaching them how to treat other human beings. I am teaching them the faith, and they know how to interact with other human beings. They're being socialized in our faith. And yes, they know how to interact with other children, and they know how to interact with adults. They're not, you know, my first grader is not in a classroom of 20 other first graders all day where she learns how to be a first grader. She's she's out in the community. She's communicating with adults. She's communicating with kids of all ages. And I'm raising my children to be adults. not first graders. I should add, I don't have a first grader anymore, but my youngest is a senior this year. But that was always my goal, to raise, and I can tell you, I have adult children now. My oldest son is 30. They're very well socialized. They're out in the community. They're very successful. They're good, loving, kind people. They're, I can't say enough good things about them. So, yeah, it worked. It was a success. I didn't mess them up too badly.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. My eldest daughter Jenna, she just went to France for the summer and spent 6 weeks over there, traveling around with a tourist agency, and then now she's working and saving for college, and she's fine. And same thing with her siblings. But I understand that people are concerned because it's scary to buck the social norm, But
right.
Another area where people question this, and fortunately, this question, there's research we can appeal to. What does the research say currently about the academic outcome of homeschoolers?
Right. So homeschoolers typically test on standardized testing significantly higher than their public school peers. Mm-hmm. So by design, standardized testing has a 50 percentile. So the 50% of the kids test above 50 percentile, 50% below. So the homeschool children tend to test collectively more around 80%. So they are out testing their public school peers by leaps and bounds.
So presumably that means they have no trouble, at least these days, getting accepted by colleges and.
Oh, good. Well, and never really. Well, public universities back in the 80s and 90s did make it difficult for homeschoolers. Private school colleges, for example, I have a friend who works for Harvard. He's in admissions, and I remember him telling me when I started homeschooling more than 25 years ago that Harvard loved homeschoolers, not just because they were academically superior, but because they were more socialized. They're out in the community. They were more engaged in their community, more engaged in volunteer work, et cetera. And so they loved homeschoolers. I've graduated 6 of my 7 so far. They've been accepted to every single university they've ever applied to and have been granted terrific scholarships. And that's without an accredited transcript. That's with my homemade homeschool transcript. So yes.
Yep, and I think people are blown away when they learn that sometimes. I know teaching. They are. Yep. Yeah, teaching at the co-op I taught at in Ann Arbor for 10 years, almost every single homeschooler out of there went on to college and got very good scholarships. They went on to Christendom or Steubenville, or they went to state universities. They went to Hillsdale, all over the place. I mean, there was absolutely no hindrance to their success. Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company, Homeschool Connections?
Well, what we do is we do online courses. We're not a school. We are a curriculum provider. So we offer individual courses. Some people do use our courses as a full curriculum, but typically we're designed to supplement what we're already doing. So we have people who range from unschoolers to people who are using, an accredited home study school. Mm-hmm. We started out just offering high school courses, but people begged us to do more. So we now offer courses from 3rd grade to 12th grade. We also partner with Franciscan University to help students take dual enrollment courses as well, where they can get college credit through Franciscan and Steubenville. So just doing a lot of exciting things. We also do free webinars. We have a podcast, Homeschooling Saints. So we're just doing everything we can to help that homeschooling parent, especially that parent you described earlier who's doubting herself. Can I do that? Do I have what it takes? We're here to tell her, yes, you do, and we're here to help you. So I always recommend going to your community, getting enmeshed in your community, because you'll find a lot of help there. But that's not always possible, depending on where you live, or sometimes you just need a little extra. So that's what we're here for.
What do people who use the program seem to enjoy most about the HSC format?
Besides Mr. Campbell classes? I think that they like the independence of it. We offer 2 types of courses. We have live interactive courses where you're in a virtual classroom. You see and hear that teacher live, and that teacher grades all the homework, is available in between classes for questions, etc. So parents like those courses to give their especially high school students, accountability. And to get them in the habit of taking a regular course, not from mom. So when they get to college, they've been there, done that, and give them a little bit of that experience. And, it also helps the mom who may have 7 or 8 younger children, and she just needs a break now and then from grading. We also have the recorded courses, which are independent learning. You watch a recorded lecture, you're doing the homework on your own, we provide answer keys, etc. Parents like those courses because they can tailor them to their child. They can work at their own pace. They can watch them any time or day. So, for example, we have a number of students who are professional athletes, work as actors, musicians, etc. And so this is something they could do outside of those activities.
Yeah, I just had a student this past semester. Maybe you know who I'm talking about, but she was an American, but her family lives in, where was it, Dubai or somewhere like that? For business or something, and she was on just a weird time schedule, and obviously being an American living in Dubai, her educational opportunities there were very limited, so her family was very happy to be able to take, especially being Catholic in somewhere like Dubai, but she's very happy to be able to take advantage of what Homeschool Connections offers. Now, how can people learn more about Homeschool Connections?
Just go to the website, homeschoolconnections.com. Go to the contact page. If you want to email us, if you have questions, my phone number is there. I'm always happy to talk to folks and help them however you can. Just call me during business hours, not at midnight. I'll be asleep. But really, feel free to email us, peruse the website. We're here to help.
Now, I mentioned at the beginning of the program that I also am an instructor for Homeschool Connections. I've taught high school history and middle school history and some other subjects there for 10 years now. And I think I have 25 or 26 courses available there. And even in my own professional career with this organization, I've seen the rise of homeschooling just through my own. I remember starting with you, Maureen, when you said, be lucky you might have 10 students, like just maybe a couple of bucks. You pretty much got to do it just to help me out, And then it grew and grew and grew, and now we're servicing thousands of families, thousands of people. So it's amazing. Now, one more question I'd like to ask, and not about HSC in particular, but a lot of times among Catholics, you will see this attitude that homeschooling is a threat or attack against the Catholic schools, like that there's a sense of loyalty that Catholics have to the Catholic schools and that one must put their child in the Catholic schools. How do you address that critique?
Yeah, I actually served on the board of the Catholic schools in my diocese. So I was fortunate to be in a diocese that supports homeschoolers and recognize that our homeschools are Catholic schools as well. I think that Catholic schools need to be searching out children in public schools and reaching out to those children and letting homeschoolers know, hey, we're here. If you need us, because there are multiple reasons you may need to put your child in school, whether it be illness or whatever. We're here if you need us, and we would welcome you with open arms if you need a school. Maybe even invite homeschoolers in to take individual classes or sports, or be involved in some way in the schools. But we're not the enemy. I think most parishes, most pastors, most dioceses see the beauty of what's coming out of the homeschooling community. We're seeing a lot of vocations, and we're seeing faithful Catholics being graduated from our homeschools. I think for the most part we get support. But, if you're in that position and you're wondering about homeschoolers, hey, reach out to us and get to know us. And we're here to support you, and we would love your support. Ask yourself how you can support your homeschool. For example, in our diocese, the bishop has a homeschool mass once a year. So special mass just for the homeschoolers and to bless them in their school year, just like we have Catholic School Sweep. So, yeah, I think we can work together. When many years ago, when the kids were little, we were in a very small urban parish with a very small school. The kids and I would go to the school once a week, and we'd clean the library. Well, we did the bookshelves. And the principal let us borrow any books we wanted in return. So, it's a great way we could work together. They had someone keep their shelves clean, and we got books. So, look for ways you can work with one another and support each other, because we have the same goal: raise these children for Christ.
And that's what's so...
academics. It's faith too.
Yeah, and I was going to say that's what's so great about homeschooling is the freedom to integrate the faith into one's homeschool regimen in whatever way you see best and is most conducive to your family's routine.
Right.
In my homeschool, where we're starting with morning prayers out of the catechism, we're doing the Angelus at noon. We often structure in going to mass if we can. So there's just many opportunities for that, and it's a real
really
great thing about it. The one thing I'd love to see more. This is pie in the sky thinking here. Homeschooling's come a long way. What I'd love to see is I don't understand why I'm not competent to teach my kids driving. Like why I have to go to if there's not every parent might have a degree, they might not be academic, but if there's one thing that most parents are competent, it's to teach a child to operate the machine that they spend 1,000 hours a year doing. And so having put kids through driver's training these past few years, I've been consistently frustrated. Like, why can't I just take my kid out and teach them? I've actually contacted my legislators. Let me homeschool driving. It's not picking up traction, though. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic. We could spend an hour on.
Oh, I know.
It's expensive. I don't know how poor people do it. It must be a fairly new thing because when I was, of course, I'm old, but when I learned to drive, your parents taught you to drive.
Yeah.
You were not required to take driver's ed.
Yeah, now it's a multi-$100 complicated thing that stretches out with all these different its complications. But anyhow, I don't want to get started on that rant. And at any rate, we are sort of running out of time. But Maureen, thank you so much for joining me. And again, you all, what's the website again?
Homeschoolconnections.com.
Yeah, and how many classes do you have in the catalog overall, live and recorded?
Oh, goodness. Recorded 400, live, I think we have 120 each semester.
Yep. And
it's a lot.
Yeah, and if you want to take my history courses, I'm in there also. You go in there, look for Phillip Campbell. But Maureen Wittmann, thank you. What's that?
I say, if you want a Phillip Campbell class, register early. They fill up and close.
They do indeed. All right, Maureen Wittmann, thank you for being with us today. And for the rest of you, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May he be gracious unto you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Until next time.